If you're new into React.js, you've probably heard this phrase saying that all the React components must be pure. But what does it mean to have a pure component? Well, let's see. Let's say you have a function right here. And let's call it my epic function. My epic function. Okay, we have this epic function and we accept it to receive two arguments, x and y. And this is just some curly braces. So this is where the code will go and we do its magic. So we have this basic function. And with this function, we accept to have some arguments right here, like as we said, for x and y. And let's say you have a variable right here. Let's say maybe the variable m, and it has a value of, let's say, 5. And here we have, let's say, maybe n, and it has a value of 7. Nothing crazy, just variables. Okay, so we have these variables and we accept this function to take the variables from here. So it will go here and this one will go here. Okay, and this right here is before we do some calculation with this function right here. The variables have 5 and 7 right here. And let's say after the calculation done by this function, we end up, let me just copy this. Okay, we end up with something different. We end up with, let's say here, okay, we end up here maybe 9, here maybe 3, just random things. And this is before, after. So after some calculations, we end up having the values of these variables changed. So we went from this to this. Okay, we went from these values to these values, and you can clearly see this is because we executed some functions, the function right here. So this is all the fault of these functions. Because of this function, we went from having m equal to 5 to m equal to 9, and from n equal to 7 to n equal to 3. So what happened is that this function right here, my epic function right here, has changed the values of this variable. So this is one example of a bad function. This is not a good function. This is not a good function because it is changing the existing values of the variables. So the function must just mind its own business. It just have to do its calculation here, and not messing with the things that are outside the scope, because this is the scope of the function. So the things that are outside the scope of the function, it doesn't have to alter them. So this is a bad implementation. So some other instance of impure function would be the inconsistency in the output of this function. So let's say with our previous example, let's say we have this epic function right here, and we have this input 5 and 7 that are going right here, and after some calculations on the first try, we are getting maybe, let's say, 12. Okay, and another time when we are doing the calculation, we are getting 35, just random stuff. And let's say here, after some calculations, we are getting, let's say, just a random thing, 59, So you can see that every time that we are doing calculation with this function, on each calculation, we are getting different results. So you can say that this function is not pure because it is also changing the result or the output every time we are doing some calculations. So this is also an example of an impure function. I know all this is just pure theoretical, but let's see some code examples to practice these concepts. Here I have this basic function right here. So this is just TypeScript complaining because I haven't called back this component, but we'll see. So I have this very basic thing, just a simple HTML tags, So I'm going to call a component right here. A component here. I called it bad. So you can see in this component, I have an existing variable called child. And initially this child has a value of number, which is 0. Okay. But with my component right here, what I want to do is every time when I render this component, I'm going to use the child, and this child is getting incremented by 1. So first, you can expect that I will get the child number 1. But as you know, with React.js, when React renders your code in the strict environment, it calls your component twice. So let me show you. You can see what I'm getting here. Okay, you can see what I'm getting here is not what I meant. So let me call this component here. Okay, bad. Okay, let me save, and you can see I'm getting child number 2. But if you come back in the component, I said I'm child number, this is just 1, but I'm getting 2. Why? Because React called the component twice. So you can already see that this value is not the same that is in this code. So every time the code is running, this component is basically changing the value of the child variable. So first time the child is 0, and when it called first time it's 1 and 2. So because React is calling the component twice, that's why we are seeing 2. And this is one example of the bad implementations, because this component right here is basically altering this child, this variable. So it's changing the value. So it is not a good example because it is changing the existing value. So a pure component doesn't have to do this. Okay. And you can see that when you have some input, the value is not consistent. And let me show you what I mean. If I call it twice, you can see every time I call it, the values are changing. You can see I went from 2 and the first is now 8, 8, 10, 12, 14. And every time I'm rendering this component, the value are changing. And when I hit the save button, you can see it's incrementing. So the values are not predictable. So one good way to do this would be to use props. And to define what we are going to use. So let me just duplicate this one here, and I'm going to call it the good one. So maybe add some break. I'm going to call it the good one. Okay. Let me just in uppercase. Great. So I'm going to create a new component here, which I'm going to call it good.tsx. So I'm using TypeScript and React. So, and RFC. Okay, let me just okay, so right here I have this basic component, and what I said, I'm going to use some props. So basically what I'm going to do is specify a props right here. So every time I call this good, I'm going to specify the child number. So let me go back the good one, and I can create some props here. Okay, so child number, and this will be a number, just to make TypeScript happy. And this number, basically I'm going to, let me just copy this page from here to here. Okay, child number. Okay, so this is the child number, and what I'm going to do is have this function using props. So that way when I call it in the parent can give its child its own unique number. So let me call it good. Okay, child number, let's say 1. Okay, and now you can see I have number 1. You can see I can call it as many times as I need, and I can specify the real ordering, the real number. Okay, and you can see the difference right here. Let me just start from 0. You can see the difference right here from here to here. You can see here I'm getting the real number, and each time I hit save, the impure component is changing values, and the numbers are not consistent, because the way I implemented this thing is bad. I'm altering this child number, but in the good component you can see that nothing is getting changed by this component. So this component is a pure component because number 1 is not altering any existing value, and number 2 is not changing the results every time. Okay, so that's it. I hope it helps, and see you in the next video.